have seen like these interviews from famous film directors that are like, I have been recording since I was 5 years old, and I have a camera since I was 2 years old. And my path was really different because I didn't want to be a filmmaker since I was really young. I actually wanted to be a musician. I wanted to play drums for a band, for a rock band. And but I changed professions every like 2 days. So 2 days later, I wanted to be a writer. 2 days later, I wanted to be a photographer. 2 days later, I wanted to be something else. So actually, when I discovered film, and it was through YouTube, I found that I could make like all those arts in one. So, for example, I could be the musician that I wanted to be because you have to have this sense of rhythm.
Exactly.
But I also wanted to be, I could be the writer that I wanted to be because I have to write my screenplays. So it was like my ability to wanting a lot of things led me to filmmaking because it's like the connection of all of arts. And actually, when I discovered filmmaking, I wanted to be a YouTuber. Here in Colombia, like 10 years ago, or in Latin America and in Spain, the YouTubers were so famous, like they were the OG YouTubers, you know what I mean? And the center of attention for the young kids. I researched how to edit videos because that was like the first thing I wanted to do. With that research, I found a filmmaking YouTube channel, and since then I didn't stop. So I made my first short film like 10 years ago or so, and I have made like 1 or 2 short films per year since then. So that's like a brief summary of my path in filmmaking.
So you learn your craft through YouTube, I guess.
Yeah, I learned everything from YouTube and from making shorts because I think like everything I know about film editing, it's based on what it is on YouTube. I know about like recording and how to block actors and how to make these decisions with the actors is based on me making short films with my friends, and we didn't know anything about what we were doing, but that is cool for me. Also, then later when I was in the university, I went to audiovisual communications degree. So that's like the equivalent of film degree. I don't know how it's called because here with a lot of film like a lot of film degrees. We have a few ones,
Yeah.
and the audiovisual communications is like the equivalent of that.
I can actually relate to that. I wanted to pursue music, but somehow ended up being around film more than music.
Yeah, I have understood that a lot of filmmakers are actually frustrated musicians. Like a lot. I think that's true. This path of Damien Chazelle, the Whiplash director, wants to be a musician.
Yeah.
A lot of the directors I know.
Would you say that it still moves quite fast for you in terms of actually being involved in film today?
Yeah, well, I think I'm still in a hurry because I want to make my first feature film soon. I think it's a normal process if you dedicate to one thing, only one thing in your life, because I think we live in a time that everyone wants to make something, but they want it fast. All these generative AI and all these things are like a result of the fast times that we're living in. Like, if you want to make an animation, but you don't want to spend 2 years making the animation, you just want the animation the second you ask for it. And I think that's bad. So
Yeah.
I have made a lot of short films, but I mean, it's like 10 years of making short films. So I have made like one a year or less. So it's like a normal progress for me.
I definitely get what you mean. We live in a time of instant gratification and the warped sense of what people can do in the space of time, really.
Yeah.
One of the common threads I noticed in your films throughout your work was relationships and the breaking down of them. I wondered whether that's even, whether you mean to actually come out with that, or what draws you to write about that. Why do you want to tell that story?
Well, the aspect of relationships, I think a lot of songs, a lot of movies are like or about love or about the breaking love. So,
Yeah.
in a general sense of way. But in my films, I was like appeal to how humans connect. Like that's one of my main interests in life. I have relationships myself that like they went wrong, they went right.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of like most beautiful things we have as humans, like the connection we can make to people.
Não sei o que passou. Apenas tem feliz terror, eu vou em casa, não pego bala, dizendo que Dejo mi tiempo para sanar nuestra relación y no sé qué otras cosas. El caso es que alguien secuestró tu Walter. Él dijo que yo entendería. ¿Qué? ¿Pero qué pasó? ¿Cómo así? En todo esto hay robots. O sea, sí hay robots de nosotros en nuestra línea temporal, pero... Ya no. Ya no, porque alguien secuestró el robot. Y como en el pasado, aún no ha pasado, tenemos que esperar que pase y así sabremos quién fue. Y nuestra cita. Andy, eso ya no tiene importancia. Igual me va a funcionar.
And also, I have seen like one of my common themes is like time, how we relate to time and how we relate to memories. Because I actually am a person that tends to live day by day, but that misses a lot when something has passed. For example, I went to Europe like 2 years ago, for example. And when I was there, I was like really tired because I have to walk to this place, walk to this other. But I knew I have to take pictures because in 1 month, in 2 months, I will remember those places and I will be like, oh fuck, why did I didn't like
Exactly. Of
remember
course.
those
Documentation.
better. Yeah. Uh,
With what you were talking about with music,
mhm.
you shared that you wanted to originally be a musician. I know that in a lot of your in a lot of your work, there's a strong presence of music. The music almost guides the visuals. Is there any relation to your background as being big on music?
Yeah. I think it is related, but I don't know if it's related in the way you expect it. Because actually, when I was that young kid that wants to be a musician, uh, it was like heavily influenced because my best friend is a musician right now. Like he is a musician, and he is actually the one that writes those scores. So my relationship with him has grown because he is now like a music producer, and when I wanted a film score, I always ask to him, and we have this relationship because I know how he communicates in the music stuff because we were like young kids wanted to be musicians, so I know that when I wanted this sound or I wanted to evoke this emotion, he knows exactly what I want. But actually, that's funny because if you think so, in this last short film, the Muertos que no son muertos one, I don't have any music at all. For every artist, is like a reflection of the film director you're consuming in that period of time. When I made my like one of my first short films that was Puertas Abiertas, I was heavily influenced on Christopher Nolan. You can see that in the way the film goes, in the way the film score goes. When I was making Sin Sentido, I was heavily influenced or filmmakers like everything Charlie Kaufman does, like the Spike Jones things, the Michel Gondry things. So that's you can hear that type of sounds in the film score. I'm finally maybe finding my voice because when you're an artist, you're copying other artists, and then you're maybe finding your voice or you know like so like yeah like the path.
I did notice a departure, at least in themes, in your. I mean, even in the camera work and the kind of general direction. How did your process differ from your other films?
Yeah, well, actually, when I attempt to make a new short film, my main goal is to make something very different from the last one. And although that doesn't happen always, because as you can see, I have like similar themes. But when I was making Muertos que no son muertos, I wanted to make like this so different thing because that's what's fun for me in the art. Like I think like the styles are very great. Like you can see, I don't know, a Wes Anderson film. No, it's a Wes Anderson film, but I think that it's great to embracing the new, like the things that you haven't made, because that's what's fun to that child that was making short films 10 years ago. He didn't know how to make anything, and he was having fun. If you already know how to make things, and you already know that the camera goes there, maybe it's not as fun as when you were like learning the craft. So when I was making Muertos que no son muertos, something like first of all the script was written like a lot of times, but I changed a lot of things. Like I improvised a lot of things in the making because the genre of the film was easier to improvise because the found footage, the mockumentary, this type of things. The goal is that they are real or as real as you can. So I remember that I was approaching for a more improvised style because that was the goal for me, and that also translated into the camera work because I didn't use storyboard or I didn't plan a lot of shots. We just went to the location and went to film like we were part of the TV show, and that's what went into the short film. So that's like things that changed.
So I would imagine that kind of sense of spontaneity actually helped. Maybe the look of the film as well. It felt like maybe less restricted in the way you approach it.
Yeah. Also, I think that when we were starting, all of the filmmakers want to be the next Chris Nolan or the next Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Not a good example because his short films look very like independent. But yeah, you know what I mean. We want to be very professional in the way we look, but we forget that. Well, if we don't have the best camera, we can use that as a narrative device to make the imitation of how professional films in Hollywood look, but we also can use that in the narrative. So, for example, we didn't have the best camera, so we knew that this could be a TV show that doesn't have the best camera also. That's good for the narrative. It doesn't have to be just as professional. It's like a way of using your disadvantages to make your film like uniquely yours.
So how would you take a different approach if you started your film journey all over again?
Like if I'm starting like 10 years ago again. Yeah, when I was very young, I was like very interested in screenwriting. So I think that's one of the things that will go well when I was young because I focused a lot of that the short film was written very strong in my own capability, you know what I mean? And so actually that's one of the things I leave the way it was. But I think I will approach like a more natural style. For example, if I only have my iPhone to record something, I probably would have made that into the story. For example, I didn't have to make the most professional film. Maybe I have to make my film. It was like Bong Joon-ho quoting Martin Scorsese that he said the most personal is the most like original, and I think that's right because I think this short film, or I think the success, you know what I mean, like the success on film festivals of this short film, this last one was that anyone, like not a lot of people in the world can capture the feeling of fear and comedy as we have here in Colombia because we live in such a country that has a lot of problems, that had in the history a lot of problems, but if you can chat to any Colombian anywhere in the world, he will be the funny people you know. He will be the most gentle people you know, and that contrast is unique like here in Colombia or here in Latin America. So I think that sense of personality and of originality is due to the specificity of the context. I don't know if that answers your question.
Detrás de esta puerta se encuentra Maximiliano, un hombre que está poseído. Vamos a ver un exorcismo sin trucos, sin mentiras, sin cortes. Todo será real.
Así está bien, más lenta no.
I was actually laughing in my room when I was watching it, and maybe I wasn't expecting it to be as funny because of the dark themes. So I guess I'm asking you a two-part question, and you've answered a bit of it, but how does Colombia inform your work? And is the funny nature, which kind of runs through all your films, is that informed by that Colombian culture and the history of Colombia?
Yeah, well, I think when you're young, you don't have, and you're privileged because I know I'm privileged, like to make films in a country like Colombia. I'm like people in my country write to me, they don't know where they're going to eat tonight, for example. So I know I'm privileged. So when you're growing up in the country like Colombia, in my childhood, I knew we had a lot of problems. But when I was making Puertas Abiertas, Sin Sentido, this type of short films, you can see they can happen anywhere in the world. You know what I mean? For example, The one of Sin Sentido, if you can put two English actors, they can make that part pretty well because it's like a global film. But when I was making Muertos que no son muertos, I was actually realizing in what country I was living in. One of the seeds of making Muertos que no son muertos actually was my mom, because when I was really young, I loved horror movies, and but I couldn't go alone. As you can think, when I was 10 years old, I couldn't go alone, and I always asked to her like, "Mom, can we go to the cinema and we can see, I don't know, Annabelle, for example?" And she always had to me, "No, if I want to be scared, I just turn on the Colombian TV news and I watch what happened today." Because here in Colombia, you can see news every day, more horror than any horror film. So I was like, remember those thoughts and those phrases of my mom. I actually like connect those two dots. And maybe we live in a country that's not so safe, but I have to make like a seed for my next short film. So I think Muertos que no son muertos is actually my first truly Colombian short film, that because it only can happen here in Colombia. I think I don't know if the next one will be heavily influenced in Colombia, but I actually think that the humor I have is a Colombian heritage. The things I see like life is obviously a Colombian heritage. So if my next short film or my next film isn't as Colombian as in a way, it has my view, and that's Colombian enough.
You were saying earlier there was a time where you used different directors as a reference point for your films. Do you still look to a director for a reference point? Who would you say is your favorites at the moment?
Actually, right now, like, if you asked me 1 week ago, I would say a different answer. But right now, I think he's called Matt Johnson. He's the director of Nirvana, the show, the movie. I don't know if you have heard about the movie, but well, he had made that show. He also made the original show that was called Nirvana, the band, the show. He made three feature films that they were called The Dirties, Operation Avalanche, and the one of Blackberry, actually, the biopic of Blackberry. And if you have the time to see his films, actually, he's a very like. I didn't knew him before I was making Muertos que no son muertos, but if you see his films, you say, well, he was copying Matt Johnson because he's a very like documentarian filmmaker. I didn't knew him, but right now I think he's like one of the main inspirations behind this type of filmmaking. I watched all of his films like 2 days ago because he only made like 4 films. Paul Thomas Anderson, I was very heavily, I like rewatch a lot of his films again, but it changed. It's like, for example, for a musician, if you ask, or for any person, if you ask, what's your favorite song? For me, it's the same for film like directors. So right now, I will say Matt Johnson. But again, as I say, tomorrow maybe is another one.
Yeah. Catch you on another day, then it could be something different. Talking about the film process, what is your approach like with actors? Or you obviously worked with like a number of them. Are you kind of put an arm around them, or is it you leave them to do their thing, or how does it differ? And how's it the same?
Since I was young, I knew that my dialogues weren't the greatest. And so always, since my first short film, I always tell the actors, look, here's the information that you have to say, but here's not the way that you have to say that information. So I'm not like a Quentin Tarantino approach that here's my dialogue, you have to say this dialogue right away. No, I'm like more, you this in the way you want, because at the end of the day, they are the character. I'm only like their coach. I love football. I know you also love football, and you're an Arsenal fan.
I do.
But I see this in the way of how a coach is to their players. Like you can you can
That's a good analogy.
you can play the game. You only have to have this idea, and at the end of the day, you can say, I don't know, we have to say this line this way, but they're going to say it in a different way, and maybe they're going to say it in the better way because they are the character at the end of the. So that's my approach to dialogues and to film actors I also don't make a lot of takes. Um, in Muertos que los Muertos, it was easy because the goal is that I love this analogy about mockumentaries and about documentaries that in fiction films, when you record it, you have to make the best shot. You know what I mean? Um, but in documentaries, it is like you have to make what you could do. You go to the location, and this is what I could get in that location. It doesn't have to be the best one. So when I was making Muertos de los Muertos, I was like, the second shot works, the third shot works. I don't have to make 127 like Stanley Kubrick, you know what I mean?
He's in a Stanley Kubrick who did, I don't know what film it was.
Yeah.
It was probably multiple films.
Yeah,
Wasn't
or
the director, he did like 47.
yeah, or maybe a lot of takes. So actually
Well,
I rely on the rehearsals with the actors, but when I'm in set, I don't like to. Maybe a consequence of not having a lot of time, so I have to run to make all the short film. I don't know if tomorrow I have more time or if I'm in a more professional set. I don't know if I will be the person that makes 120 takes. Probably I'm going to be the one that relies a lot on rehearsal and knows that in the third take we have it. Also, this is written in stone, like, you know what I mean? If tomorrow I have a scene, this is not, well, if I have to make 40 takes, I have to make 40 takes, but it's the average. I don't make a lot of takes. With takes, when I was starting off, I talked a lot to the actors. I was saying, you have to make this, and then you have to cross the door, and like all of this. But when I was growing up as a film director, I realized that they don't listen to any of that. They're just remembering your dialogue. So you write very good screenplays, very clear screenplays, so that when you get to the film shooting, they know what to do and they don't improvise in that sense of a way. But yeah, that's like my general approach of filmmaking.
yeah. I guess you're more free. You allow the actors to have autonomy. I think football was a good comparison or analogy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm to interrupt you, but also,
No, go for it, yeah.
like I think the film director more than like we know how to act. Some actors are turned to film directors and they know how to act, but I am only a director and a screenwriter. I don't know how to act. What could I say to this professional actor? Like, he knows more about acting than me. I know what's the spirit of the film and I know what's the tone of the scene. That's maybe my principal inputs on the actors. Because maybe they don't know if this scene is going to be funny, if this scene is going to be scary, and I know that in my head. But about acting, I don't know a lot of that. I only know that maybe if you feel it and if you have the sense that you got it, you have to stay with your guts and you have to cut to the shooting because perfection is the opposite of making it in time. So you have to probably sometimes you have to make it in time.
Okay.
And you have to make it good enough. No, not perfect. Other filmmakers they want the perfection, and that's part of the style. And but my style is more of the tone of the scene, and I think it's more important the tone of the scene and the tone of the ambience of the actors rather than the shot. When I was talking to my cinematographer in the last short film, I was always telling him like, if you have something wrong, go on. Like I don't care. Works for me because you are like cutting the sense of the rhythm and of the tone to the actors. But at the end of the day, the film is the actors. It's not the perfect cinematography.
No, absolutely. You don't want to create a state of panic for the actors. You want them to be able to still, even if they do make mistakes or have a setback, you want them to still be in the zone, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. I know you spoke about writing your films. Is being a writer, director really important to you? Do you feel that you would always need to be behind the actual content of the film? Where do you see yourself with that?
Yeah, well, I think my ultimate goal is to make my stories, not because they are the best ones, but because they are my stories and I feel for them. I always want to be a writer director because when I direct, I have the opportunity to direct without my screenplay. I feel very lost because I don't know what was wanting the screenwriter. And I really admire directors like, I don't know, David Fincher, these ones that they don't write their screenplays, because I think that's very difficult to me. For me, the process of directing and the process of writing is one process. Like, it's the same man doing those jobs. It's just part of the process. Actually, I'm I also think the process of editing is part of the process. That's why I have like edited the 3 short films I made. So yeah, I think I always will need the writer part because that's how I make films, and because I actually think I got into filmmaking to make art. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that I'm making art, but it's like my craft. And when they say like, well, your screenplay is right, but maybe someone could do it better, and I will think like, why would I want it to be
Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
like better for who? I know this is an industry, but for example, you're going to say to John Lennon, yeah, your songs are very good, but someone could sing better. Probably someone could also could sing better. But that's the goal. I don't know if that's the goal. My goal is to make my thing. I don't want to be the better things. You know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I will always the writing part because that's part of my craft, and I actually feel very lost when I write. I want to direct, and when I'm directing with a lot of people, I want to be alone in my room writing. So it's a two-part process. It's so important to me.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's Scorsese which says that you should write about what you know about. We spoke about your latest short being a departure from what you've done throughout the years. Where do you see yourself in terms of themes and what you want to explore films in your next films? Do you want to explore even more comedy or?
Yeah, well, I think comedy will be in all of my films because I think comedy is not a genre, but it's like a way of seeing things. You know what I mean? For example, you can see that Muertos que los Muertos is not a comedy story. It's a horror story, but like you are seeing it in a comedy POV. And I think that would be a thing that I follow in my following films. I don't know why I'm a guy that likes to try new things, and maybe my next short film it's very I don't know another director. You know what I mean? But I'm sticking at this moment in a certain style right away because I try to explore things, and that's what's fun to me in art and in the craft. But I think that they will all have comedy, but not in a genre style, but more in a character style, because you can make a crime film and it will be a comedy, or you can make a horror film and it could have comedy elements. So yeah, that's important to me because it's also the tone. It is how you can sense the personality of the filmmaker. I'm a guy that, even though things are bad, I try to like look at the bright side of the. That's I'm actually very Monty Python fan, so that's I'm an optimist, and I think the personality of the filmmaker you can evidence that in the art or in the films. So yeah.
Could you see yourself doing a full out and out?
What?
Could you see yourself doing an actual comedy film in terms of like genre?
If I love the story, yeah, that's the most important. When I was very young and I wanted to make comedy films, I started writing like gags and writing jokes. But then I realized the most important thing is the story. Like you have to have these high moments, these low moments. You can like insert little jokes here and there, but at the end of the day, it's about a structure. So yeah, if the story is right, I will make any comedy. You are from England, right?
Yeah, from London.
I'm heavily influenced in London in England comedy, and I didn't know in British comedy, and I didn't know how much because I love Monty Python. I grew up watching Mr. Bean. Like Mr. Bean here in Colombia was such a hit. And I loved him. I know I don't know how is his viewing in England, but here in Colombia he's like God to me.
Nah, he's a big icon. Yeah, there's people I've met or know who not from England who said, "Oh, I love Miss Bean," or they had that same childhood experience. I'm like, wow, it really got around.
He's a genius, and I think Richard Curtis that was the writer, and they went to write other films. Yeah.
Are you working on anything at the moment with film?
But actually, like. As I told you before, my next goal, like I have made a lot of short films, and my next goal, I think it would be the first feature film. I know it would take time because, as you know, a feature film is so difficult to make. So maybe it will not be released next year, or maybe not even the year after that. But right now I'm working on the screenplay of that because I haven't wrote a feature length screenplay before. I have only write like the short films. But yeah, that's my next goal. So I'm out working on my first feature film, and I think that is where I would see where my career is going. Because, for example, if I make something like very mockumentary, like very muertos con sus muertos, well, I know that's maybe my style. But if I make something very different, maybe my style is just to not have a style, and that's great for me. And I think that's rare because I know a style also it's also a branding thing, because we live in such times where we have to market things. And for example, I'm a horror filmmaker. I don't consider myself a horror filmmaker, but if you go out to the market to make for example, that Jordan Peele, he's a horror filmmaker and a comedy filmmaker, but tomorrow he will make a crime film, or he probably not will make a crime film. So I think that the style is also a branding thing. But I don't know. I will be very glad to be the first filmmaker that doesn't have such a style. Like more like a Stanley Kubrick thing, because he had a style, but he did a lot of genres. So I think I liked about him.
I think that's something cool to aspire to, definitely. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining.
So thank you so much.